The desert night was a canvas of silence. The stars hung sharp and cold over endless dunes, and the only sound came from the low hum of a diesel generator outside the military outpost. The men inside were restless, whispering over maps and sipping lukewarm coffee. Their eyes darted now and then toward the man at the center of the room, Captain Adrian Cole. Adrian, dressed in dusty fatigues, leaned over a table scattered with satellite photos. His face was cut with lines of fatigue, his jaw locked in focus. To his men, he was unshakable, the kind of commander who could march through gunfire without blinking. Yet even he could feel the weight of the desert pressing in, an endless waiting game that gnawed at the nerves. Then it happened. The radio crackled. At first, no one moved. They were deep in blackout protocol. No one was supposed to break radio silence. Adrian's hand hovered over the device as static hissed, then sharpened into a voice. "Captain Cole, it's HQ. You need to hear this immediately." The men stiffened. Something about the tone, clipped, urgent, almost trembling, carved through the room like a blade. Adrian reached for the receiver, his knuckles whitening around it. "This is Cole." The next words didn't come like orders. They came like a funeral bell. "Your daughter, she's in the operating room. Collapsed lung. Multiple bruises. They don't know if she'll make it through the night." The room went silent. Maps slid from the table as one soldier stood abruptly, stunned. Another muttered, "God," under his breath. But all eyes returned to Adrian. He froze, his heart hammering, but his voice was low, almost mechanical. "Say that again." The line crackled, then shifted. A softer, broken voice slipped through the static, one he knew too well. "Dad." Adrian's throat tightened. "Lena?" Her words came strained, punctuated by labored breaths. "Mom's man, he locked me in the basement. I tried to get out, he hit me. I can't breathe." The receiver trembled in his grip. Around him, hardened soldiers exchanged glances, their faces pale. They had fought beside Adrian, seen him charge into fire, but none had ever seen his armor crack. He closed his eyes, Lena's voice echoing like a blade to the chest. Suddenly, memories surged, her last video call weeks ago. She'd kept her face tilted, avoiding the camera. He'd brushed it off, thinking she was just shy, adjusting to her mother's new life. Now, every second of that call twisted into guilt. "Lena, stay with me," Adrian whispered into the receiver. But the line went dead, swallowed by static. Adrian stood frozen, the world spinning. His chest rose and fell heavily, but his eyes burned with something no battlefield had ever brought him: helplessness. Colonel Briggs, his commander, stepped forward. Briggs was a man carved from steel, tall, weathered, unflinching. But even he saw the truth in Adrian's face. There was no mission here anymore. "Cole," Briggs said firmly, "pack it up. Your mission's over. The Black Hawk is yours." The words cut through the suffocating silence. Soldiers who moments earlier were plotting coordinates now looked at Adrian with quiet respect. Every man in that room knew the meaning. This wasn't just a soldier's fight anymore. It was a father's. Outside, the distant thrum of rotor blades began to grow, echoing across the barren desert. Dust swirled into the night air, carried on the wind of something larger than war. Adrian didn't speak. He didn't need to. He grabbed his gear, his movements sharp, fueled by fire. His war had just shifted continents. As he stepped out into the desert night, the wind whipped across his face, but he felt none of it. His mind replayed Lena's broken words over and over. "Mom's man locked me in the basement." For the first time in his career, Adrian wasn't marching toward an assigned enemy. He was flying home to face a war no uniform could prepare him for. The Black Hawk roared as it descended, blades tearing through the darkness. His men watched him go, silent, knowing this was the kind of mission no one ever came back from the same. Adrian climbed aboard, the cabin vibrating beneath him. His hands gripped the steel frame as the helicopter lifted into the night sky. Below, the desert shrank into shadow, disappearing into the horizon. Ahead, waiting thousands of miles away, was a truth he was almost too afraid to face. But he would face it, because Lena was all he had left. And as the Black Hawk carried him into the dark, Adrian's eyes hardened. This wasn't about war anymore. This was about justice. This was about blood. The Black Hawk cut across the night sky like a predator, its blades thundering above towns that glittered faintly below. Captain Adrian Cole sat rigid in the cabin, helmet on his knees, eyes locked forward but seeing nothing. Every vibration of the helicopter rattled against his chest. Every gust of desert wind reminded him of how far he'd been from where he should have been. Lena's broken words replayed endlessly in his mind. Mom's man locked me in the basement. His hands clenched until his knuckles whitened. A soldier's grip, but this wasn't a soldier's fight anymore. This was a father's. Hours later, the chopper touched down at a base stateside. A military convoy was already waiting, headlights burning in the darkness, doors thrown open. Adrian barely exchanged words, sliding into the back of a black SUV. His commander's voice echoed in his head, "The Black Hawk is yours." He'd been sent home not as a soldier on leave, but as a man called to war inside his own family. The drive to the hospital blurred. Neon signs, traffic lights, darkened highways, all dissolved into static images. His chest was tight, his throat raw, but his face was stone. Soldiers learn to contain fear. Fathers don't. When the SUV pulled up to the hospital, the sight hit him harder than any explosion. The sterile white building loomed under floodlights, its sliding glass doors glowing like an invitation and a curse. Adrian stepped out, boots crunching on asphalt. For the first time since the desert, he hesitated. He wasn't ready for what waited inside. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and bleach, sharp and unforgiving. Nurses rushed past with clipboards, their shoes squeaking against polished floors. Every sound was amplified, a phone ringing, a monitor beeping, a distant cry. Adrian moved like a man underwater, heavy and slow, his chest pounding as though every second dragged him closer to a truth he didn't want to face. Then he saw her. Through a narrow window in the ICU ward, Lena lay small and fragile beneath a web of wires. Tubes curved from her nose and arms. Her chest rose shallowly under the rhythm of machines. Her face was pale, bruises blotched across her cheek and collarbone. She looked like she had been fighting a war of her own, one no child should ever have known. Adrian's hand pressed against the glass. For a soldier who had led men through chaos, nothing had ever cut him open like this. His knees nearly buckled. A soft voice broke the silence behind him. "Adrian." He turned. Samantha stood there, his ex-wife, Lena's mother. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes rimmed red as if she'd been crying for days. She clutched a tissue in her hand, wringing it like it was the only thing keeping her standing. For a moment, old memories surfaced. Their wedding, the early years, Lena as a toddler. Then those memories curdled. She hadn't protected their daughter. She hadn't been there when Lena needed her most. Adrian's voice was low, steady, but every word shook with fury. "How did this happen?" Samantha looked away, staring at the floor tiles. I didn't think it would go this far." Her words dropped like stones into silence. Adrian stepped closer, his voice rough. "You didn't think? She's in there fighting for her life, and you didn't think." Tears slipped down Samantha's cheeks, but she still wouldn't meet his eyes. Her silence said more than words ever could. Adrian's stomach twisted. There was something she wasn't telling him. He turned back to Lena's room. The machines beeped steadily, a rhythm that mocked the chaos burning inside him. He whispered through the glass, as if she could hear him. "You're safe now, sweetheart. I'm here." But inside, he wasn't sure if she truly was. As he stood there, a shadow moved down the corridor. Two detectives, their suits rumpled, eyes tired but sharp. They walked with purpose, carrying something heavier than paperwork. Adrian straightened instinctively. One of them approached, voice firm. "Captain Cole, we need to talk about what happened in that house." Adrian's fists clenched at his sides. He already knew part of the story. Rick Dalton. The name was poison in his blood. But as the detectives exchanged glances, Adrian sensed it. There was more. And whatever they were about to say would tear open a wound deeper than any bullet ever had. The hospital corridor was hushed, the overhead lights humming faintly as if even they understood the weight of what was about to be said. Captain Adrian Cole stood tall but rigid, his gaze fixed on the two detectives moving toward him. Their expressions were carved from stone, but their eyes carried something heavier, the kind of knowledge that could split a life in two. "Captain Cole," the older detective said, flipping open a worn leather notebook. "I'm Detective Harris. This is Detective Ward. We've been assigned to your daughter's case." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Rick Dalton. Where is he?" Detective Harris's mouth curved into something grim, almost satisfied. "Under arrest. We picked him up 3 hours ago. He's being held without bail." Adrian's fists clenched. The name alone was enough to ignite a fire in his chest. He imagined Rick's smug grin, the leather jacket, the charm that had masked his violence. He thought of Lena's bruises, her voice shaking on the radio. "Mom's man locked me in the basement." Finally, the monster had been caged. "Good," Adrian muttered, voice sharp as steel. "I want to see him rot." But the detectives didn't leave. They didn't even close their notebooks. Detective Ward's gaze flickered toward Samantha, who sat slumped in a chair nearby, staring at her knees as if the floor could swallow her. Her tissue was damp, crumpled in her fist. "There's something else," Harris said carefully. His voice carried the weight of a hammer about to drop. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "Say it." Harris glanced once more at Samantha, then back at Adrian. "We questioned her. Your ex-wife admitted she knew what was happening." For a moment, the words didn't make sense. They hung in the air, impossible to connect with reality. Adrian stared at Harris, unblinking. "Knew what was happening?" Ward's voice filled the silence, blunt and merciless. "She knew Rick was abusing her daughter. She saw the bruises. She heard the fights. She let it happen." The world tilted. Adrian felt the floor lurch beneath him, his chest caving in as if someone had ripped the air from his lungs. He turned slowly toward Samantha. Her face was pale, streaked with tears, but she still couldn't look at him. Her shoulders trembled, her lips parted, but no words came. "You knew," Adrian whispered. His voice was raw, a soldier stripped bare. "All this time you knew." Samantha finally spoke, her voice cracking. "I thought if I stopped him, he'd leave me. I thought he'd calm down. I didn't want to lose him." The words were knives, each syllable sliced deeper than the last. She hadn't just failed Lena, she had chosen a man over her daughter. Adrian's vision blurred with rage. He took a step forward, but Harris quickly raised a hand. "Captain, not here. Your daughter needs you more than anything right now." From inside the ICU room, a faint rustle broke the moment. Lena stirred, her head shifting weakly on the pillow. Her eyes cracked open, glassy with pain, and she whispered, barely audible through the glass. "Dad," she knew. The hallway collapsed into silence. Adrian pressed a hand against the glass, his throat burning. Seeing Lena like that, bruised, broken, tubes keeping her alive, and knowing her own mother had allowed it, was worse than any battlefield nightmare he had ever endured. Samantha finally broke, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I never wanted her hurt like this." But Adrian didn't hear her. Or rather, he refused to. His focus was on Lena, and the faint pulse of life she still clung to. The detectives exchanged a look, their notebooks snapping shut. "Rick Dalton will face trial, and Samantha Cole will be charged with neglect and endangerment," Harris said. Adrian didn't respond. His silence was louder than shouting, heavier than any curse. In that moment, something inside him shifted. The man who had survived war zones, ambushes, and firefights now carried a different kind of battle scar, betrayal by the one person who should have protected their daughter when he wasn't there. As the detectives walked away, Samantha's sobs filled the corridor. But Adrian's eyes remained on Lena. The war wasn't overseas anymore. It was here, inside sterile hospital walls, where trust had been shattered forever. And Adrian swore one thing silently to himself. No one would ever fail his daughter again.